Hey everybody, welcome to the AoP Podcast. I'm Nick Bettis, AoP 15, and in this episode, I am talking with Romal Tune. Now, I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. It was great. We covered a lot of different topics, everything from what your story has to do with your preaching and your ministry, to pastoral depression and suicide, and even talked a little bit about baby food. It's a great conversation. It will help you today, and it will get you excited about coming to the National Festival in January. So here is my conversation with Romal Tune. Romal Tune, thank you for being on the podcast today. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to it.
For those who don't know, Romal Tune is a writer. He is an author. He has been in ministry, and he works for an organization called TMS Global. They're a really exciting organization that does some really cool things. We're going to talk about them more in a minute, but they are a sponsor for the 2019 National Festival of Young Preachers in Atlanta, Georgia. And they are also sending their president, Max Wilkins, to come be a plenary preacher. The festival is going to be amazing. It's going to be great. If you want to learn more about the festival or learn how to register, go to academyofpreachers.net. Romal, you are going to be teaching a master class. Is that right?
That is correct. I'll be teaching a master class, and Max will be serving in another capacity. I think one of your main stage speakers.
Yeah, he's going to be one of our plenary preachers. And so, do you know? I know we're still a few months out, and you and I were just talking about how the semester started, and I'm a seminary student, and so it's a busy time for everybody. And I know that you guys at TMS are working to try to get a lot of students involved. I've seen your guys' booth on my campus, so I know we're a few months out yet. But do you have any teasers for anybody about what your masterclass is going to feature?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the master class is really, especially for those who are in seminary, I think quite interesting. We're going to talk about how your story really shows up, not only in your preaching, but in your vocation and ministry. Basically, those experiences that have shaped who you believe you are in the world, the types of things you preach about, the types of topics that make you uncomfortable, and how many of those things are not only connected to your calling, but how that calling is also connected to your life story and the experiences that have shaped who you believe you are in the world.
Fantastic. I'm kind of bummed out that that's only going to be an hour or so. That sounds great, and that sounds like something that a seminary class for a whole semester would try to tackle. So that sounds great.
Yeah, having been in seminary and then from the transition from seminary to ministry. Aligning what I learned with who I am and my story with my vocation has been a journey unto itself. Yeah. I mean, you learn things in seminary that serve you well, and then you also realize that there are other tools you need and skills beyond seminary that you have to find outside of the academic process. But then you also learn who you are as a leader. And how you lead and how you interact with people. And so in this master class, we're going to look at how has, your story shaped how you show up with people, your ability to have empathy as a leader, your leadership style. A lot of it is rooted in beliefs you have about yourself and about your role in terms of relationship with other people.
Man, yeah, that sounds great. There's a lot there. And especially there's... at our festivals, we have people from, I think it's 13 to 34 or 35. And what's really interesting that this is our 10-year anniversary is that we have students now, or we have young preachers who have come through and walked through their ministry life with us, that they may have started as late high school or early college, but now they're either just finishing or have finished seminary and are walking into their first pulpit, their first real life day-to-day ministry experience. And so, a class like that is really going to be great for anybody who comes.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can get as many as are available to be a part of the conversation, because There'll be some information sharing, a couple of exercises where I'll take, participants through the process of learning how to understand their story and how it shaped them, but also in many ways how to decode those stories that have shaped your sense of self, so that you can really get on your desired path that really aligns with your vocation and who you're truly meant to be in the world, not only in service to God, but how you show up in relationships and community and every aspect of your life, to kind of decode those narratives, to find your true self and your true path so that you can thrive. So
Great.
We'll do some exercises and stuff like that. It'll be pretty fun.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, you are going to be there through the sponsorship by TMS Global. So why don't you explain to everyone who's listening, what is TMS Global, what do they do, and also specifically, what do you do at TMS Global?
Yeah, so TMS Global the acronym stands for Train, Mobilize, Serve. And if I were to describe TMS in my own words, is that we cultivate catalysts for who create diverse discipleship communities. So as an organization, we are catalysts for cultivating diverse discipleship communities. And we do that by preparing people for global engagement around the world through trainings, and through different ways of discernment process of where you called to serve, and preparing you for serving in that context, understanding the different cultures, understanding how you show up in that culture, and then walking alongside you throughout the length of your call to global missions. As an organization, we don't really do short-term missions, to the extent that we don't do, 1 and 2 week trips. We pretty much work with people who have a sense of calling and vocation to serve globally somewhere in the world, and we walk alongside them indefinitely in that journey and in that call, providing them with different services and needs that they might have along the way, helping them through the process of learning a new language, understanding a new culture, dealing with the whole process of immersing themselves in that new context. And we make sure that they're okay when they're doing it.
Great. Yeah. And I, like I said, I've had a couple experiences to be able to talk with people at TMS, and I've known a few fellow students and friends who have teamed up with TMS. And I know you said that you guys don't really do short term, which is kind of a cool, interesting thing. But the booth I was at new student orientation for all the new students last week, they talked about this really exciting thing that you guys do, which is, like you said, it's not really a short term mission trip. It's more of a shorter term kind of audition, probably isn't the right word, but where they will team you up with an active missionary in the field, and you basically get to live the missionary life for, I can't remember exactly how long.
It's called Green Light Gateway, and there are other variations of that. We have Green Light Medical and a few other components of it. And basically, the application process takes place in January. But the college students and those who are newly graduated go out in the summer for 6 to 8 weeks where they are immersed in a given context. We have placements on the African continent. I think we have a leader, one of our directors, Sarah Parham, could correct me on this, but I believe we're in Kenya, we're in Ghana, we're in various parts of Thailand. I know we have some people in Bangkok. And we're also in different parts of India, but in other parts of the world too. And so for the people who engage in the Green Light Gateway programs, those young leaders spend 6 to 8 weeks of their summer being immersed in context, specifically to discern if they're called to global missions or to be a part of the process of understanding if you know you're called to that kind of ministry, what that looks and feels like. So they get a sense of it. And you can't really get a good sense of that in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's I've done a couple 2 week ones here and there. And man, it's barely enough time to adjust the jet lag, much less get a sense for the real life there.
To get a sense of real life and to really get to know people, to really just immerse yourself in the culture, go in as a learner, and be a part of that community and understanding it, and who the people are and who they are in Christ, and get a sense of that. So, this is why the program is at least 6 to 8 weeks, because after 2 weeks you've done all there is to do, and now you are like everyone else, just living and getting to know people, and that's in many instances when you find your God moment, and just casual conversations and dinners and breaking bread with people, or just, hanging out in a community. So it's less about doing and more about being.
So I want to move a little bit more to you. So what do you do? What is your role at TMS Global?
Yeah, for the last couple of years, my role started out as the senior advisor to the president for diversity and inclusion. That role has since evolved to most recently become vice president of strategic partnerships and innovation. And the roles are very similar to the extent that in my work, I build strategic partnerships like we're doing with the Academy of Preachers, connecting the organization with other like-minded institutions out there that have a vested interest in the church, clarity of vocation, and global missions, seeing the church as one community, one body. So I spend a lot of my time cultivating new relationships, identifying those points of synergy, and helping to map a way forward where we can do, some things programmatically together, identify clear outcomes and ways of service that have an impact in the world.
Okay. This week, I did visit your website, and it's romaltune.com for anybody who wants to check it out. And it's busy, so you clearly do a little bit more, at least, than just what you do at TMS. So why don't you talk about the other things that you do, your speaking, your writing?
Yeah, so prior to joining the TMS team, at the request of Max Wilkins, our president, I spent a significant amount of my time traveling around the U.S. and abroad as a speaker and author. So while I've been at TMS, my other time when I'm not in the office is also spent traveling, working with different churches. I have 2 books out. The first book, God's Graffiti, came out almost 5 years ago. And that kind of set me on a trajectory as an author and full-time speaker. The most recent book, which is actually the impetus for my workshop, my master class at the Academy, Love is an Inside Job, and the subtitle is Getting Vulnerable with God, came out in April. And that is a book that deals with what I've been saying around understanding your story, healing your narrative, finding your authentic self, and putting yourself on the path of thriving and meaning and significance in life. It deals with combining faith and therapy as tools for a holistic life, and healing the various parts of our stories that no longer serve us well. So that's a long way of saying I spend a lot of time combining my work with TMS with my work outside of the organization as an author and speaker. I travel quite a bit in the U.S. and also in a number of other countries doing workshops around emotional health and wellness and book events.
And you hit on this theme that I've seen in my research, looking at some of the things that you've written, healing. You mentioned it a couple times when you were describing your book, and on your website, you have the 6-word sentence that defines your life. And on your website, it's third person. I don't know if in your head it's third person or first person, but it says he helps hurting people find healing. So
yeah,
what is that? What is that to you?
Yeah, so a friend many years ago took me through this exercise. Actually, I took a team to visit a church in Houston that was doing a lot of ministry, serving the community in a number of ways. And he wanted us to clarify in a sentence, our story. And basically, he said, at the end of your life, when it's all said and done, everyone's going to have something to say about you. And typically what they say about you can be summed up in a 6-word sentence. He was this or she was that. In 6 words, that's all you get. And he gave us the assignment to take a break and create our 6-word sentence. And we shared our 6-word sentence, and he said, the thing about it is, whatever people say about you, you get to have an impact on what that is. And he says, now that you know your 6 words, for my friend Rudy, his 6 words are, he loved like it mattered most. That's why it's in the third person, because it's what you want other people to say about you.
Oh, okay.
For me is he helps hurting people find healing. And then Rudy said, once you know your 6 words, every day that you get up, everything that you do, every person you interact with, every gathering you're a part of, is to make sure that those are the 6 words that are true about you. So whenever it helps to define and clarify the legacy you leave behind with every interaction. I think sometimes we're moving so fast and engaging so many people that oftentimes what we fail to realize is that with each interaction, at the end of it, you're leaving behind a story about you. If you never see that person again and they're asked about their interaction with you, how you engaged them, how you treated them, what you said to that person will determine what that story, what your legacy is with that person. And so when you know your 6 words, it helps you to be more intentional about how you interact and how you show up based on how you desire to be remembered.
So why is your life story and your 6 words centered around hurt and healing?
Because when I talked about story, for me, much of my journey, I found that my calling was in my story. And a big part of my journey was in healing my own narrative, my own beliefs about myself, my own, the thoughts of anxiety that were in my head, and the, mindset of scarcity and never enough, the catastrophizing things that haven't even happened, and worry happened when I was young. And through the work of, through prayer and meditation and therapy and just the presence of God in my life, I've been on a healing journey. And for me, a part of my vocation is now to offer that journey to other people, to show them that this has been a path that has worked for me. Maybe you will find in it some tools that can work for you. And it's an invitation to engage in a journey of healing so that you can thrive and be who you're truly meant to be in the world without carrying the baggage of stories and memories that no longer serve you well. So for my 6 words are absolutely, he helps hurting people find healing. And that really boils down to healing the stories that you've been telling yourself about you that no longer serve you well.
Mm. So how do you think that affects or should affect how a young preacher approaches preaching? Keeping in mind other people's hurts and pains and healing. And your own,
yeah,
I guess, and it's really your own. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I realized that I'm learning this as you're speaking it, and I think one of the things as preachers is we have this problem of we're either too focused on them or focused on us. So I don't know if what you're talking about is kind of a synergist of both, or
it's the synergy of both. In the book of Revelation, the Word of God says, I believe it's Revelation 12:11. I'm not sure if that's correct. But it says they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimonies. So in the context of a young preacher, the nature of a testimony is through getting to the other side of something, getting to the other side of pain, some form of brokenness, some form of trauma, and then it becomes a testimony, and that testimony then turns that wound into a scar. And that scar is the evidence of healing. So through preaching for someone like me who I believe is used through my calling to help people tap into those stories and be courageous enough to confront them through my testimony and the testimonies of others, showing them that healing is possible, that God is still healing, God is still moving. And there has to be a testimony that gives evidence to that. As a young preacher, I think sometimes the challenge is when you've not been preaching a while, you're not even aware sometimes how subconsciously you're actually preaching your own pain or preaching your own story, and unbeknownst to you, it's why certain passages of Scripture may resonate with you and certain stories, because you can identify with them, sometimes unintentionally, unaware to you that this is the reason why this passage speaks to you, because you haven't looked at the connection to your own story. The other part of that, I think, for a young preacher is being able to share that testimony and in a healing way, in a healing journey that doesn't make it self-involved, but you simply uses it as a tool to give evidence to the power of God and show some empathy through the lens of your own story, and therefore, in many ways, humanizes the preacher. Oftentimes, and that's important today, because too often the preacher isn't humanized. It's almost as if he or she is separate and apart from the lived experiences and challenges of everyone else, when the reality is every preacher will tell you that's absolutely false. But sometimes we're pushed to present a persona that everything is good, and that we then sometimes bring that persona to the pulpit, and rather than using the power of our own testimonies as tools for those who are listening and connecting that with the Word of God.
So how do we know when that that vulnerability goes too far, or if you think it might? Because I know there's a lot of pastors suffer with depression. Me in my own ministry time, I have, and depression's not the only thing that causes ministers to be in a lot of pain. There's a lot of other issues, just church issues, family issues, just life. And so, what are some signs or things to look at for young preachers who want to be vulnerable and want to break down that persona and preach from their real life experience, but also not turn it into a personal therapy session?
Yeah, I think there are several things. I think number one, as I pointed out, when preaching, we always have to remember that the gospel is good news, right? So the story, that means that the intent of what you're saying through sharing, through empathy and sharing parts of your story, the intent is to land at good news, right? And healing and redemption and restoration. If the story doesn't get to the good news of the gospel and the evidence of a living God who is still healing, redeeming, and changing lives, then that story is not ready. In fact, I always tell people it's important to know that you've moved from wounded to a scar, because when you're wounded, all you do is bleed all over people, right? So there's no good news at the end of the story. It's just woe is me. When you can tell of the brokenness, that it went from brokenness to blessed, that there was change, and that is the intent, to use the story as a tool, as evidence of redemption, healing, and resurrection and restoration, that people can see through that story, then that story has value and context. So you always got to look at your intent, your motive. Where are you taking people? How does this matter to them? How are you able to, through your point you're making, show them the value to them, and that it's not just about you? How through your story are you able to tell it in such a way that they see themselves, because they're able to see beyond you? And yet, even though they can empathize it because of the human condition, but you've taken them on a journey. So that's really important to it, knowing your intent, knowing how this story takes you from one place to another, that leads to good news, and being able to show people the relevance and significance to their own lives.
Yeah, and I had actually at, I think it was the 2017 National Festival of Young Preachers, I got advice from my preaching circle leader that was very, very similar, but kind of summed up. She just said, you preach from scars, you don't preach from wounds. And that really put this different just imagery in my head. And you talked about like the way you talked about it, there's this mental picture of the preacher just kind of bleeding everywhere, and you're in your head, you're like, yeah, that doesn't seem right. But it's but it's also, it's about perspective, and I've been through some things that, like in the middle, I definitely should not be preaching about what I'm going through, because I'm stuck in my darkness. I'm stuck in my pain. And now that I'm on the other side of that, like you said, I can preach the gospel that says that God worked and that God is working. But sometimes you're just stuck. But from your life and from all the people that you've talked to and all the places that you've been, what are some ways that if there are some young preachers listening who feel like they're stuck in the hurt, that they're stuck in the pain, and they're having a hard time moving towards healing, moving towards changing the wound to the scar, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, and just also based on my own experience of feeling stuck, feeling like this situation I'm in does not appear to be getting better, or feeling like, how do I keep ending up here? I thought this was over, and yet here it is again. When you're in the context of a broken place or a wilderness, if you will, it's not a time to feel like you're stuck there. The question is, what can I learn about me while I'm here? What is this experience, this pain, teaching me about me? And how am I complicit in my own pain? Because sometimes the reality is that broken people break things. And until we tap into the root narrative that is at the source of our behavior that may have created the situation, and pull it up and redeem what that experience took from us, we're likely to revisit it until we've learned what it is to learn, not about the experience or about how we got here, but until you've actually learned what is trying to teach you about you. Sometimes in the midst of the pain or the brokenness is to be still in it, be present in it, acknowledge it, own where you are and how you feel, and then ask God to show you what this is supposed to be teaching you about yourself, not about the experience, but about you. Because once you center yourself in God and realize that where you are is not who you are, because you always have to remember that where you are, what you're going through, what you're feeling is not who you are. You are a child of the divine. You are beautifully and wonderfully made. God has a plan for your life. God has purpose for your life. That's who you are, and that never changes. So when you align where you are with who you are, everything around you begins to change. I think the challenge for some of us is that we allow the environment we're in to determine our feelings and how we feel about ourselves and how we interpret what we're going through, when it's actually the other way around, that your feelings serve your thoughts and your thoughts serve you. Let me say that again. Your feelings serve your thoughts and your thoughts serve you. In other words, when you have a thought and a feeling that they're not serving you well and owning who you really are in God, then you have to ask, what's the value in being discouraged? What's the value in being afraid? What's the value in being anxious? What's the value in rehearsing this scarcity narrative in my head, or this narrative in my head that is catastrophizing? What's the value to me in thinking this way? That's not who I am. And who would I be, and what would I do if I stopped catastrophizing? If I stopped feeling like I wasn't enough, like I couldn't do it, like things are going to go poorly? What would I do if I stopped thinking that way? And then you pivot to, what is the desired outcome that I really want? And how do I align my thoughts with the outcomes and the feelings that I really want, rather than pivoting to those things that are not serving me well?
Right. Well, over the last day, I mean, really, at least yesterday, as for when we're recording this right now on Tuesday, you tweeted twice about pastoral depression and on suicide prevention. What was going through your mind yesterday?
Well, we know September is National Suicide Prevention Month. That's number one, and there's been a lot more information coming out this month and people sharing. And I'm always mindful that as a minister, as someone who's out preaching often, the human experience of being a preacher, that sometimes you get up preaching even when you don't feel like it. You get up and have to put a smile on even when you are hurting and life is hard. You have to put it away. And there is oftentimes the challenge of having someone or some place to go and lay it down and be safe. And it can lead to depression, at the worst end of it, suicide for some. We've seen over the past several years an increase in suicide amongst preachers. It's a silent topic that many don't talk about, but many of us are aware of. And many of us as preachers know the challenge. Of course, there are mental health issues, but outside of mental health issues, there is the burden of the narratives that many of us have accepted as true about wearing the persona of life being okay and not having a safe place because I'm seen as the preacher and I'm supposed to have it together. So there's no one I can really tell about my pain because I can't let anyone know I'm in pain. They won't see me the same way anymore. And that's a set of beliefs we've accepted as true that actually don't serve us well in terms of being whole. So this is why I share those articles to not only name the challenges for preachers, the loneliness, the having to have your armor on because of the constant battles, either spiritual or social or with members, and the realities of this isn't as easy as you thought it was going to be, and being able to lay down those weights through the use of therapy, not just alongside prayer partners and pastoral counseling, but professional therapy as well. And simply just having some people in your life. I call my people my fave fives. There are five brothers in my life at various phases in their journeys and ages and different backgrounds that I am able to talk to about different things. And they're willing to hold me with open hands, without judgment, and through their own wisdom, sometimes provide guidance or sometimes just through a ministry of presence so that I can get it out without worrying about being judged or talked about or gossiped. None of that. That we are genuinely friends, and our primary intent is to make sure that each of us thrives. And I encourage every preacher to have more than just one person, a core group of people in your life whose sole intention is to be a part of making sure that you thrive and that you can feel safe with and share your story with.
Absolutely. Yeah. And myself, I've been in, professional therapy, and, I had to go through that because I went through a season where I was dealing with suicidal thoughts and depression, and, everybody's journey is different. Everybody's journey out of that is different. But I always, when I've counseled and talked with people, I always tell them that I didn't start getting better until I started asking for help. As long as I tried to just deal with it and push it through, it just got worse and worse. And so we definitely want to encourage, anybody listening, if you think you're dealing with some kind of depression, or you just want to talk to somebody, or you're having suicidal thoughts, please reach out to a friend, to somebody close, reach out to a counselor, and get yourself some help. You deserve it.
Yeah. And, and a part of it is also, as preachers in various contexts, preaching that in ways that confront these stigmas that don't serve our communities well. There are a lot of stigmas within the church and even other religions that stigmatize therapy. There are cultures that stigmatize therapy. I've met friends, I'm an African American, and my culture has for a long time stigmatized therapy as, we don't tell our business, or it's a sign of weakness, or even just as men outside of culture, most men are told we don't do things like that, just man up and be strong. And when you really think about it, we accept these cultural narratives, these religious narratives, and even these gender-based narratives as true about weakness when it comes to therapy and just being strong, and it's not serving us well and being whole and being our best selves. And so sometimes we have to confront those narratives and those stigmas so that the people that follow or walk alongside us don't find themselves with nowhere to turn because we perpetuated a story that is not helping them get the help that they need. So we have to be courageous enough sometimes to break through these things and show how there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm a Christian, and so I truly believe there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ. So I'm not worrying about being shamed. And if I can use my journey of healing through therapy and faith to help someone else get on a journey of wholeness for themselves, then telling the story is worth it. And far more than worrying about what other people think who are living into a story that's not helpful.
Absolutely. Well, I want to transition into some kind of practical communication preaching stuff. So you have had a lot of experience speaking, and I know that's something that some of our young preachers are interested in and may have the opportunity to do. And so I want to kind of take your perspective on preaching and speaking. And when I say speaking in this context, I mean like being a main speaker at an event, that it's not a sermon. And so how do you approach speaking and preaching differently?
Context, knowing your audience and context is very important. I oftentimes deal with friends who are preachers in the sense that most of their speaking takes place in churches, whereas a lot of my speaking it can be in churches, it can be at national nonprofit conferences, it can be at a college, or a university, a high school, it can be for a national nonprofit, you name it. Context is important, and audience, understanding your audience and what your audience needs. And how are you going to deliver the message in a way that they can hear it and receive it and get what they need? In essence, it's not about the speaker. It's all about the people sitting there and need of what it is you have to share and being able to share it in a way that allows them to receive it in their language. Sometimes I jokingly say to people, as preachers and speakers, and in some sense, we have to learn how to speak in tongues, and the tongues of the context that we're in. In other words, how I might deliver a message on Sunday in a pulpit would be different from how I deliver that same message at a corporate retreat of CEOs. Can be the same type of content, but different uses of language so that they understand it in the language that they know. But if I showed up only using church language in their context and they don't understand that language, they're not familiar with some of the colloquialisms and sayings or even scriptures that we use, that message falls on deaf ears because they don't understand it or they're trying to interpret it through their own lens. So as the preacher and speaker, you are constantly discerning and asking God to show you how to deliver this in such a way that these people get what they need.
Right, and that goes for speaking or preaching. I mean, really, that's life, really, right? I mean, that's just ministry and interaction with other people.
Right, they have to be able to digest it themselves. There was a time, and you're about to be a parent, you'll understand this very soon. There was a time before baby food came out that in many cultures, mothers would take food from their own plate and chew it up really fine and then put it in a baby's mouth, because in its form for that mother, if she gave it to the baby in the same form, they could not digest it. But she had to chew it up real fine so that the baby could digest it in its own way. A preacher once told me early on, that's how we treat the gospel. We have to present it fine enough so that the people can digest it. Because if you try to use a lot of that language you're learning in seminary, it's going to get stuck.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to digest it. But we have to translate those things into language that people can understand and get what they need.
I feel like Baby Food Gospel should be your next book. That'd be that'd be a good cover. Really would. So, hey, looking forward to as we're ending this conversation and kind of looking ahead to January. What is one thing, just one thing, that if only one thing young preachers can take away from your masterclass, what do you want that to be?
I think the most important thing that I would say to a young preacher who would be leaving my masterclass is that they would walk away taking very seriously and finding their own paths. And what I mean by that is being your unique self and all of its many forms and its successes and its failures and its brokenness and its healing, taking your whole truth, all of you, on this journey that God is calling you to, and just saying yes to it all. That I would want them to walk away committed to being their whole self and not compartmentalizing their lives on the journey, but saying, God, use all of it to your glory.
Amen. Well, where can people go to learn more about you and everything that you do?
All of my social media, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and if you're over 40, Facebook, at my name, RomalTune.com, Romal Tune. On all social media, it's Romal Tune. That's ROMAL. Last name is TUNE. And you can, get information on my speaking and purchase books by going to my website, RomalTune.com. And both books are available on all major book-selling platforms, Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble. You can find the books everywhere. And if you purchase them, bring them with you because I'll sign them. I'll be doing the book signing at the Academy of Preachers conference in January.
Cool. Well, hey, thank you for being on the show today. It was awesome to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right, appreciate it. All right, everybody. So if you want to hear more from Romal Tune, make sure you come to the 2019 National Festival in Atlanta, the National Festival of Young Preachers. If you want to learn more, go to academyofpreachers.net. If you want to learn more about Romal Tune and what he does, check him out on social media or check out his website. Thanks for listening and have an awesome week.